Hey there, and welcome back to the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, where we are all about technology and pedagogy and those great practical teaching ideas that you can use in class tomorrow, that sound teaching that drives everything that we do, and giving you lots of practical things, lots of useful things that you can use right away. I'm Matt Miller. I'm the host of the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, author of Ditch That Textbook. So glad to have you joining us in this video. And this video, I know I say this for all of them, but this is really true for this one, I am really excited about because this is a topic that I think is fun, it's brain friendly, and I think it's something that all of us can start using more to get a little more joy out of our class, but also to help our students process and retain in a little bit different way. And so we're talking about visual thinking. And if you're not sure exactly what visual thinking is, hang on, you're in the right place. Yes, it applies to you. Yes, you will come away with some really good practical things from this session. So we have a guy who I have seen present at a conference and was so impressed by his presentation that I thought, my goodness, I need to share this with the summit. And so that's how he came to be here. And so I want to introduce you to Manuel Herrera. So Manuel, how are you? And thank you so much for joining us, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm good. I'm super excited to be here too. This was awesome when I got your email. Yeah, my name is Manuel Herrera. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. Currently, I am the innovation coordinator for the Afton School District, against a small school district just outside of the city limits of St. Louis. So my role in education right now is working with teachers and students on integrating technology, instructional practices, and then I also kind of facilitate a design space that we have there at our high school with kind of design thinking with our students. Yeah, this is my 16th year in education, so I've come with quite a bit of experience, and it's interesting to see kind of how my pendulum has swung the other way, being very tech heavy, and then now kind of moving into this visual thinking, what we'll kind of get into. So it's super excited, and I'm glad I can be here to share with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got to ask you before we dig into this too far, were you, as a student, as a kid, were you a doodler? And if so, tell us about it. And if not, tell us when you started to become one.
So I've always been a doodler. I've always drawn my entire life, just in general drawing. Since I was a kid and could get markers and pens, I've always enjoyed doing it. It definitely trickled into the classroom, much to my teacher's dismay, because we came from a generation where drawing in the classroom or doodling in the classroom was considered off-task behavior.
Right.
So I struggled with that for a long time. I would do it and then kind of try to get away with it. And even though I knew that somehow this was helping me, and I've learned, kind of looking back and reflecting, that I doodled for different reasons in different ways, just for different reasons. And it's kind of refreshing now that we're really starting to look back into this, and there's now research on it, on the benefits of it. So yeah, I've kind of done it my whole life. I've done it as an adult, and still under that stigma of like, he's not paying attention.
Right.
Even as an adult, like I would sit in professional development or listen into staff meetings and just continue to sit there and doodle and draw. Sometimes that was pertaining to what was going on. Sometimes that was just random doodling. But it still was like, up until a few years ago, it was still kind of like, you're not paying attention, or what are you doing?
Right. Yeah. I totally get you. I used to get in trouble at church. I would do what we call now sketch notes, and would try to do that to make sure that I was following along with the message and everything. And, I'd have the side eye from people going, yeah, what are you doing? And so, of course, doodling is only just one part of this whole big umbrella term of visual thinking, which I think both of us are definitely aficionados of. So why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of what you think this whole visual thinking idea is in general? Kind of help us put our finger on what exactly it is we're going to be talking about.
Sure. So kind of the way I see visual thinking is being able to kind of express yourself, your ideas and your thinking through drawing. And well, through drawing is one medium. It might be actually through maybe digital images. But for me, it starts there, drawing out what's in your head, what you're thinking, in a way that is for you to process information. So like I might be listening to something, in order for me to grasp that concept a little better, I might create some kind of visual with a simple doodle, because now I'm looking at that. Now I'm able to, it's a little more tangible. I'm able to work with it a little more. And you know, certainly there are some concepts and some ideas that are a little easier to draw. But for me, that's what it is. It's allowing me to put that onto paper, put that onto a note card, put that onto a sticky note, just to get the idea out. But depending on which medium you use, or as far as like kind of paper, you can then move that around. You can then sort that that piece, those drawings, and arrange them in a way that maybe makes more sense, or maybe allows you to ask more questions or identify more, you know, themes. So that's what I see visual thinking as. But you're producing that. You're creating that. You as a student, or you as a listener or learner, you're creating that. It's not. It has not been handed to you. It has not been printed out for you. You're creating that because it's an image that makes sense to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you were kind of alluding to the fact that it is more than just drawing. It can be other things. And I liked how you were saying, you know, you can take what you've created and kind of move it around and stuff. So let me ask you a couple questions real quick, and you tell me yes or no as far as, do you think this falls under the umbrella of visual thinking? Number one, writing things down on sticky notes and then putting them into organization and all of that. Yes or no on visual thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Number two, I think I know the answer to this one, but I still like to bring it up. Drawing or writing on the whiteboard in front of class with students.
Oh, absolutely. As a teacher?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's like the best way to show kids.
Right.
I have kind of an interesting. I'll have an interesting kind of story for that. But go ahead. But yes, I do think that is visual thinking.
Okay. Cool. I'll give you one more then, real quick. In something like Google Drawings or Google Slides, pulling in pictures or icons and arranging them and adding text with them. Visual thinking or not?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still visual thinking. That's what I was saying earlier. It's, you know, I think it's some of it's drawing, or, you know, actual writing a utensil to paper, or using images, whether they're digital or not. It's still organizing information. It's giving you something to connect that idea to.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, in short.
Okay. Okay, cool. I kind of picked out three of them that I was pretty sure you were going to say yes to, but I still thought it'd be a good exercise anyway.
No, you know, it is, and I've got it is, because especially the last one, because we do often think that it is just drawing, it is just putting pencil to paper or pen to paper, but it is. It's also still taking digital images, taking images, clip art, whatever it might be. Even whether you print them out, or like you said in your example, taking them and using them in a slide and or arranging them, you're still organizing your thinking. You'll attach some type of meaning to each of those drawings or each of those pictures, and that picture is going to speak volumes.
Yeah.
About your thinking. And so if you can organize that, you know, there's a book by Dan Rome that talks about that 90% of the content that's been created on the internet is visual. And whether that's icons, drawings, graphs, but it is, and we interpret that different ways, and we attach different meaning to that. And so it's powerful, and we read it really quickly.
Yes.
We process it really quickly.
Yeah. Don't they say that, like, evolutionarily over all of these, you know, tons and tons of years, that from the beginning we've been able to process pictures because that's what we see with our eyes every day. Everywhere is visual, but then we created text so that we could get spoken communication across to other people without actually having to be there, and that, like, there's a big long delay on that, and our I don't know. I hate to use, well, anyway, we're not going to get into evolution. That's the point that I'm making, though, is that, you know, for all of history, we've had visuals in front of our eyes, and it's just kind of the way that our brains are built, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about written language they are drawings. They're drawings arranged in a way that we make meaning out of them. You know, any word that you write out is a drawing that has a larger definition than what is written in front of you. You know,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So, And as far as the board goes, I'm throwing this in so that we can come back around to your funny story, and then we'll move on to something else. But whenever I talk to a teacher, I do a session on sketchnoting or visual note taking, and I always like to tell them that their biggest and best canvas for sketchnoting as a teacher is the whiteboard. You know, that's the one of the best places that they can do it. And you said that you had a story related to that, right?
So yeah, so it was kind of tied to I can't remember what the second one was you asked me, but
it was sticky notes and then the board and then images.
The board. It's kind of it's more along a sheet of paper. So
okay,
when I learned that how this actually started to make sense, and I'm starting to realize like, okay, there's a place for this in the classroom for me, and how this works is I was working with the student in our Project Lead the Way class, and they were designing a prototype for a project, and they came to me because technology was my title, and they needed to use a 3D printer, and so we started to have a conversation about what they wanted to 3D print, the product they were making. And so I said, okay, so just tell me what you're trying to do, and I'll see if I can understand everything you're doing. So as they did this, me just naturally took a piece of paper, a large sheet of paper, and started kind of drawing out what I thought they were talking about, and making annotations and adding to this drawing and some writing. And when we were done, I said, okay, and I turned the paper around and I pushed it in front of them, and I said, okay, so what I hear you saying is this. And then I would kind of repeat them and show them, and they're like, yeah, yes, and we also want to do this and this, and they would point, and so I'd turn the paper back around and I would start writing back on it, turn it back around, give it to them, and said, okay, so now here are the changes we made, so here's what you were looking to do. You want to add this piece here and do this. And they said, yeah, and then they grabbed a pen and contributed to the drawing. And I was like, that's it. We're just talking. We're just communicating. It is a way of sharing information, a way of communicating. There was no point in time that I say, okay, kids, today I'm going to draw your thinking, or I'm going to visualize this. I made it a natural part of our conversation because that's how I operate. That was just the way I thought. And so, but it hit me. I was like, wow, okay, so now we're talking, we're communicating through this piece of paper and a couple of markers and pens. And I'm like, this is powerful. And so when we would go work on other projects in the same class, the kids then would bring drawings to me this time.
Oh, cool.
So they knew that, okay, Mr. Herrera is going to do this. Let me go ahead and put this on paper. And so, and they were a lot in the drawings were in a lot of forms. So when I say drawing, I don't necessarily mean a doodle or an image necessarily. It could also be just organized thoughts in bubbles or in boxes or whatever. So when I say drawing, it's anytime somebody's putting something to paper and showing it to me, or expressing themselves in some way. Yeah. Aside from just text.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Cool. So, yeah.
So that's why, like, I think, and I'm sorry, but that's why I think the whiteboard, when you said the whiteboard is like when a teacher does that or is able to do that, it is just the teacher communicating to the students. This is what I'm thinking. This is what we're talking about, and drawing that out. Again, it's never that I'm going to draw for you today. It's not. It becomes, because when you say that, you then the apologies begin. Like, oh, I'm sorry because I'm not a really good artist, but. Right. And if you just do it, the kids never pay attention to it's not a good drawing. They just are listening to you think, or listening to you give information to them. So when teachers ask me about that, part of it is you just kind of got to do it too, and I know that's easy. It's easier said than done for some, but.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And the thing that I found too is that if it's that natural outpouring of your ideas onto the board in visual form, I've also found, kind of like you said, a lot of people will say, I'm not a good artist, so I'm not going to try it. But I've found that the reality is that you don't have to be a great artist to get ideas across visually. Like a rectangle can be a car, or a house. As long as they know what it's supposed to represent, it kind of, like, as far as I understand anyway, it activates that same part in your brain that, a more elaborate piece of art would. So, like, for instance, I'll draw kind of like a shape that looks like a cloud, like this. And I'll show it to people sometimes, and I'll say, what is this? And they'll say, a cloud. I said, okay, what else could it be? And they'll say a bush, and then I'll put little legs on the bottom, and they'll say a sheep. And then I'll put a trunk on the bottom, and they'll say a tree. And I say, and I'll bring up other things like, if I said that it was this, would you believe me? And I think that's the big thing about it too, is I found that if you don't feel like you have great artistic ability, A, it's probably because you don't do it very often, you don't practice it. And B, you can get those visual ideas across even if you don't have exceptional skill. I mean, everybody can draw a square or a triangle or a circle or a stick figure, and that gets a lot of that same stuff across, right?
Yeah, absolutely. These, we do exercises with kids where we kind of start to build visual libraries. So we do go through that with students where we give them terms, or we have some preset terms, and we will draw some icons to kind of get them started, to get them thinking kind of what we're doing. And one class in particular in middle school, it was a social studies class. I drew the United States. We were going to talk about United States, so I kind of drew a picture as best I could of the United States and had the kids practice it. That was one of the icons they did. And so I came back and I was like, okay, turn to your neighbor. We'll show what we've done. And I walked by this one girl, and she had just drawn. So our drawing was the best we could, a picture of the United States, just the outline. That's all, no text, no anything. And I came to this one young lady, and she had just drawn a circle, and it said USA. And I said, that is perfect. That is perfect. She's like, I didn't want to take the time to draw, the outline of the United States. I'm not a good artist, kind of went through those. And she said, but I still know that that's the United States, and that's what you're talking about. And I said, perfect. Because if we branch off of that for whatever reason with our drawing or with your thinking, that represents the United States.
Yeah.
And simple, we're using 3 letters in a circle.
And if you start to get off onto the tangent of that isn't good enough, that's a slippery slope that you don't want to go down, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes sense to them. If it makes sense to a student, that's what's important. When I do these sessions, I always get kind of the question of, well, how do you grade it? And we definitely go into that. Well, I need to grade their notes, but I'm, my argument, well, who the notes for the student, because
Right.
I was that student. I was the one who didn't write everything the teacher said or everything that was on the bulleted slide. I drew smaller pictures to make sense. So, yeah, it's a rabbit hole with that, but
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so so we've kind of set the stage, I think, really well for what are we talking about here when it comes to visual thinking. So I hope that we can go kind of more bring it down to a more practical in the classroom level. Like, what would this actually look like? What are some things that I can actually try? And we've already talked about a couple of examples. Like, I love the idea of the back and forth with the students where you would write something and then they would write something and just went back and forth and kind of created something together. So I think that's great. You started talking about building a visual library that I hope that we'll come back to a little bit more about where you can use that and how you can build that with students and all of that. But let's kind of take a turn for the practical, and I'll let you pick either from the teacher side or from the student side, or however you really want to do this. What are some ways that this can actually look in the classroom? If a teacher wants to do more visual thinking, or if they want to have their students doing it, either way or both, what are some examples?
What I like to do with visual thinking is the kind of my end to get kids going with this is I do a lot of design work with students. So students are often asked to design products in our classes. We ask them to design videos, we ask them to design posters, we ask them to design, social media graphics. So I take those opportunities when I work with kids to introduce drawing to show what they're trying to do. And that's practical because kids are asked to do that in every class. And so one of the things I start with, especially even with younger kids, and writing as well, is storyboarding. Storyboarding for pre-writing or storyboarding for videos. That kind of allows you to have the kids start with their own ideas. You're not trying to introduce already vague concepts to them or new concepts to them, because that's much more difficult. But if you start with things that are familiar with them, kind of on where they understand, storyboarding is a great place to start. So, for example, I was recently in Boston, and I worked with a 3rd grade class, and they were about to start writing, for their class. And so we worked with them, and I do this with my son. He's 9 years old, who has to write every night. a certain amount of time. And so he has a hard time. He's like, I don't know what to write about. I'm having a hard time. Here are my prompts, or here's some suggested prompts. And I said, well, let's talk about your day or your afternoon. And I did the same thing with the third graders. And we, for example, did his choir sang at the Cardinals game. They got to sing at the Cardinals game.
Nice.
And said, well, why don't you talk about that? And I'll write about that. He's like, well, okay, well, I mean, I went to the Cardinals game and I was really nervous, and then I sang. And I said, okay, there's more there. There's definitely more there. So what we did was we kind of roughly storyboarded. And when I say roughly, we didn't have a grid. We just drew. And so I had him draw, okay, so let's talk about where you started. And he would say, okay, we started in my house. So we would draw his house, or our house. And I said, okay, what was the next thing we did? It's like, oh, well, then we went to go pick up our two friends at their house. And so we draw a line in a car. And then what was the next thing you did? And we kind of kept going. But little details came out in his drawings that he wouldn't have said otherwise. And so, we finished this drawing out. We went from our house to our friend's house. And then on the way there, we laughed and we had fun and we sang songs and we drew those. We drew those best we could, and we kept going. We rolled up to Cardinal Stadium. We drew kind of a stadium, and I saw how big it was and this and that. And we went all the way kind of through the story, all the way up until he sang. And I said, okay, let's go back and let's put some emojis at different points in the story. So let's tie some emotions. And kids get that. Kids understand emojis for the most part. And so we would draw smiley faces, sad face, nothing intricate, just something to note their feelings at the time. And so now we've got this drawing, and now we've told this story, and now we have these details that didn't come out in the story that he told me first. I was nervous. I went to the Cardinals game and I sang. And so that can be applied in a lot of areas. Like I said, that was pre-writing. In third grade, we did tell me about your morning up until Mr. Herrera was standing in front of you. So, we drew their story out, and we'd go back and look at these stories or these storyboards, and I could tell like what their comforter looked like. I can tell the logos that were on there. I can tell what their nightstand. I can tell the way their beds were arranged. I can tell what they had for breakfast. I can tell, and these are details that they would not have said. They would not have written.
Right.
I say that, but I would think a lot of them wouldn't have written that. But now they have this in front of them. Their thinking is out of their heads. Their thinking is in front of them on their paper. And now they've made room for them to start work on writing. And now they can go back. So that can be applied for pre-writing. That can be applied for storyboarding a video. That can be applied for planning out a social media campaign. That can be planned out for putting together a graphic or a poster. You could draw all that out. So, those are really simple, easy ways that lend themselves to just naturally doing something.
Yeah. And, I could even see, because I think some of those examples were kind of like humanities-based examples, like you're writing for English or for social studies or whatever. I could even very clearly see examples of what you were talking about there with storyboarding when it comes to math. If we're thinking of places in the real world where this kind of math could happen, if you draw it out, you might be able to see the way that the math processes come together a little bit differently, or especially with science. I would think that there's tons of this. Of course, if you're doing like a lab experiment or something, retelling the lab in visuals could be great, or, just the way that, the water cycle or certain processes or whatever work. I could see it. It just seems like there are so many connections, so many ways to pull this storyboarding idea. You could do it with, with like the formations in soccer or rules of a sport in a PE or a health class, or, it could just kind of go on and on with all these different content areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find ways that works. And sometimes, not sometimes, some of the structures that we used to use with kids, be kind of pre-technology, are great structures. And some of these are graphic organizers are great. And what I love about that and using drawing and paper is that it can get as big as you want it to be. You can use butcher paper, you can use the dry erase boards, you can use chalkboards. Chalkboards are still good. Those are still valuable because that's a place for you to put thinking down. You can always capture that later with a device if you want to, but yeah, I think that those are great places to start. Those are good ways to kind of just clear your head for some of the new learning that you're trying to do. You have to get some of that stuff out of your head. Definitely, some subjects lend themselves, like you said, science. Some of the cycles, some of the processes,
Hmm.
drawing those out. I do like that kids drawing out their own graphic organizers, their own, because sometimes we make them try to fit into the small, I don't know. There's always the Venn diagram with the smallest
Yes.
part in the center, and we've pre-made that for kids, and now their hand, especially for the little guys, their handwriting's large, and so um, they get more frustrated with that, and that's where their mind is going: is how do I
Yeah.
fit this?
Yeah.
Let them draw it themselves. Let them create them themselves. I know we're quick to use digital tools to create some of these graphic organizers, but butcher paper is awesome and
Yes.
incredible. And like I said, chalkboards, and so are dry erase boards, because it just gives you room to move and think.
Yeah.
Uh, Capture it later, afterwards. I kind of believe that.
Yeah. You mentioned something about letting kids make their own graphic organizers, and you kind of like read my mind on that, because you started to mention graphic organizers, and I love them because and see, I think graphic organizers led down the wrong path become drudgery and boring, repetitive worksheets. But whenever they're open-ended enough to guide kids gently through the thinking, instead of asking for rote repetition, that's where I think that they're magical. And the neat thing is that it goes beyond, like, you ask teachers about graphic organizers and immediately, boom, Venn diagram, boom, KWL chart. It's like all those ones that we've used forever. And it makes you think you don't have to use all of those pre-created ones. You can make, and I'm looking at it from a teacher perspective too. I'm thinking, you can make your own graphic organizer. Like, here we go. I'm going to start drawing on paper. Okay. It was only a matter of time before this happened. And so I could see, like, if you're trying to get kids to figure out the three parts of some sort of process, start to finish. Like, there's something that I just drew, and it could be like, here are the three, a little lower. Here are the three parts. Let's put all the details of the different parts into this, and then we're going to put them in linearly. So then we just write them in order right here. I just made that up. You can't find you. I mean, maybe you could find something like that on the internet. You probably aren't going to find it in your binder of 100 graphic organizers that you bought at the teacher store.
Right.
But make something up like that, and you can make photocopies of it, or you can give kids blank pieces of paper and have them draw their own 3 squares and their little line, and then they make it their own and they own it. Or you could put it onto something like a Google drawing and have them, put it in there or whatever. But I think that's just brilliant, the way that you brought that up, that it doesn't have to be those same old graphic it's not a Venn diagram. It can be so much more than that to help walk kids through what they want to think about.
I agree. I understand, like, there's some structure that you want to have with kids just to teach them organized thinking, and I get that. But I also think there's some freedom for kids to create their own, just like you just did there.
Mhm.
This is an interesting story. We were doing some kind of visual thinking with second graders. They were reading Frog and Toad books, and the story was about Frog and Toad. I guess this is a whole series, but we were talking about events through the story, and so we would draw. We basically took a piece of paper and we folded it in half, and we said, okay, we're going to draw Frog on one side, Toad on the other. That was it. We were going to draw these their emotions, and we used emojis again. We didn't draw the frogs. We used emojis at different points in the story, and we kind of just went in order. So we didn't say number. We didn't say, draw lines. And what was interesting is that the kids did it. It was very structured, and we got them to start thinking about the story. And one little boy decided in the middle, in order for him to help remember the emotions of the two animals at different events, he drew the events in the middle. He drew, like, when they were at the pond, and he drew the pond. When they were in the field, he drew the field with flowers. When they were they were in the house, he drew the house. And that was all in him. And it was like, this is perfect. Like, that's part of kids, like, just expressing themselves and making sense of what they're hearing and learning. Because if some kids, and it probably was me, that structure didn't always work for me. Like, my mind didn't always fall in that structure. And that was him. He didn't stick with what we had. He knew it was okay to add these other details, which was awesome, which was really cool.
Yeah.
I've also learned that elementary kids are not scared to draw. They love
Right.
to draw. There is no like, I don't draw very well. I don't know when that happens. At some point, it does. You have to reassure them it's okay to draw. But yeah, elementary kids love to draw.
Yeah, yeah. And like that Picasso quote, I'm sure you've probably heard of it, that all children are born artists. The goal is to try to remain an artist as you get older.
Yeah.
I love that. You meant I have a feeling we're going to keep doing this over and over again. You're going to say something that's going to make me think of something. And I remember someone telling me about a remix they did on timelines that I think falls under the guise of visual thinking, where they said, instead of just having the timeline straight across like this and having little points all throughout, that puts the timeline on the x-axis, right? They introduced a y-axis to it also. So now it was time moves in this direction, but within the story, it was like how happy or depressed the main character was on the y-axis. So now all of a sudden things are going good and we're progressing this way, but we also go up higher here. And that's where your emojis play in too. You could throw those in and then you see something horrible happens and that's the conflict. And now it dips down on the y-axis, but we're still moving forward on the time. And you start to kind of like mix all of those things together. And all of a sudden, think about the way that kids express the way a story is told through something like that. Yes, it shows the time and the progress, but now we've also got this y-axis that shows other things. And you throw in little icons or emojis or whatever onto it. And now you've got this whole big representation that shows way more than just what happened first and what happened second.
Absolutely. Like there's an example I have in my session that I show a timeline like that.
You were the one where, I'm sorry, I just ripped off your idea. That was from your session and I didn't even realize it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Example. I forgot. Yeah, you were there. There was an example I have that, yeah, she's telling a story and it's a life event. And I didn't even catch it. I didn't catch it. Somebody caught it in my presentation that, oh, if you look, she's got low points. And I just saw it as like more of an aesthetic, up and down, up and down. And she said, no, look, there's low points in whatever the event was. And it's physically a low point on the diagram. And then, it kind of perks back up and, more things happen. And some of the more exciting or happier events are definitely above that axis. And axis, again, I didn't even see it. I just thought, okay, this is a visual representation of the timeline. And when that teacher in the session, she was like, oh my gosh, that's what she was doing. I was like, that is it. So I've kind of taken her idea.
Yeah, exactly.
And taken it and said, yes, this is what, this is possibly why she did it. Timelines, again, those are awesome to use. Those are structures that can look different ways for different kids. And it's amazing. It doesn't have to be so text heavy either. You can use those drawings of those events or those things to organize, this story as you tell across. Having a 9-year-old and having a 6-year-old, I want them to learn how to tell stories. Like I would love to see all their work that comes back about storytelling in that form, like for them to organize their thinking that way. I would love to see when they have to do a presentation, somehow include that pre-work that shows their thinking, that shows what they were trying to get out, because that's, as we know, as adults, that's a real skill. We probably do that. I know I do that with planning out my presentations. I'm a big note card guy, and I plan out my slides on note cards, and I get all my ideas out. And I just worked with our high school kids on teaching them how to prototype. We were teaching them how to create prototypes, and part of that was just getting ideas out onto note cards. And even if you were trying to plan a presentation out or even plan your video out, storyboarding, that's what it was. You have all these events in your head and in your mind, or these ideas, and they're not necessarily always in linear order, but if you can get them out and get them onto something, even if they're out of order, you can then go back and look at that. And again, I was saying earlier, you can rearrange those timelines. Like that's visual thinking. I think I'm repeating myself from earlier, but
no.
It's another way to do timelines. Kids can use note cards, draw things on them, the ideas, the events, the topics, lay them on the ground, lay them wherever, and then organize them in sequential order. And that whole up and down, like that whole axis, like that's that visual that gets into like, a totally different way of thinking when you tie emotion. Emotions are low, emotions are high, emotions are kind of
Mhm.
even keel. So
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be cool.
And what I love about this is we're like you, it's kind of in the title, I guess. We're talking about the way kids are thinking and not necessarily how can I put a grade on that? Or how can I get that in the grade book? Or how can I make them do these 3 things so that I knew that they did it? It's like, it's providing them with ways to think deeply through something. And I think if you have those note cards, you mentioned note cards. I had to pull something out of my backpack. You're going to love this. You ready for this?
What are those?
Those are half index cards of many, many colors.
Oh.
This is a presentation that I'm working on. And this was a brain dump of all of the different ideas. And I had them stuck up, it was like spread all over my bed.
Yep.
And so I started moving them into order and putting them into piles and everything. And I've still got, I mean, I've been carrying it around in this little bag.
While you're doing, we're gonna compare notes here. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm listening to you.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I love that, you know, you get these manipulatives and you help kids to think deeply through it. And then maybe afterwards, maybe they make something for you and maybe that goes in the grade book. But doing the thinking first, I think, is really important. And I love what you said about storytelling too, because there are stories in everything. And I think we sort of missed that. Several years ago, I can't remember, this is going to be such a vague story, forgive me, but there was a big business related magazine that dubbed that year. And it was like, I don't think 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in there, the year of the story, and how businesses were going to, you know, sort of like live and die or thrive based on the stories that they could tell about what they do. And I think that that's coming more and more into the real world. And I think that's an important skill. You know, we talk about creativity and critical thinking and problem solving and teamwork and a lot of those things, but I think storytelling plays into it too, because a lot of times you got to get buy-in, and that's really kind of at the heart of storytelling.
Absolutely, because I mean, the story. You know, there's a couple of different ways you can tell stories or deliver message, and you know, there's the practical way, which some of us operate, the very procedural step 1, step 2, step 3, and that'll get our buy-in. But there's also that, you know, the side of storytelling where you kind of want to speak to the heart and you want people to, you know, that
Yeah.
intrinsic buy-in, like, yes, I want to do this because it spoke to me. And you know, that's a skill. That's a real skill. We talk about, you know, these 21st century skills that we're supposed to be teaching kids, and that's where some of that happens. You know, some of that actually naturally happens in there. So I'm gonna show you my screen real quick.
Yeah.
Because I want to show. I did a presentation for the first time, and don't mock me for my tabs. That's
We get it.
My to-do list.
Oh, that's not bad. There's only like, what, a dozen of them.
Yeah, it's not too bad. But yeah, so this is like a presentation I did. I did it all in note cards because I was already doing it in note cards. So I ended up doing the whole thing in note cards, and just took pictures of the note cards.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, my stack was like huge. It's just how and it worked out. I will never do that again, because to edit any of those, you have to completely redraw them. So I'm not going to do that. How do I stop? There you go.
All right. Nice. All right. Very good. I love the direction we're going here. And so let's come back to something you mentioned earlier. You were talking about helping kids build a visual library. And I know maybe to some that are watching this, that might kind of feel like we're going to take a day to draw. And what good is that going to do when I've got all of this stuff to cover and all of this? But if we're going to help kids think visually and create something and put their ideas out on paper or whatever visually, and if there are great gains and all of that, we've got to equip them with the tools to be able to do it, right? So in that case, I would think having a visual library, and to me, I'll be curious to hear what this is to you, but to me, that is a library of a bunch of little icons or little pictures or little things that I can draw at a moment's notice without thinking about it, that I can use to express my ideas. And I'm curious to hear from you about what that visual library is all about, why it's important. How can we help kids develop it without, you know, blocking off days on our lesson plans to help them create it?
I mean, it is. It's valuable, and you said it kind of pretty much what I would say. is that part of that thinking is like we're trying to recall or trying to come up with conjure up an image in my head to then put onto the paper. You want kids to be able to kind of quickly do it, not have to do so much of that thinking. And that takes time. It does take time. You are going to have to dedicate some amount of time to something, or to not to something, to creating these images. One of the ways you can do that kind of naturally maybe is to introduce some of the concepts before you start teaching. So you may have kids draw some of the this visual library based on the content you're going to be teaching, because you don't want them to be thinking about drawing that so much as you want them to be organizing and rearranging it and putting it on paper. You want them to kind of just naturally do it. So you may have this set of vocabulary words or set of concepts that you create those images for them just to kind of get them started and get them thinking. It's going to be a lot in the front end, and you will feel like you are giving them the information. But by the time the mid-year hits, or even the quarter, or the second quarter, or the third quarter, by then they'll have had these skills have built up, and then by then they'll be able to do it on their own. It's you got to be willing to know that it's going to be hard first. We all know it's going to be tough in the beginning, and kids are going to be slow, and you're going to worry about the kids who want to be artists and draw every detail. It's just part of it. You're never going to take the artist out of the kid. Please don't ever do that.
Right.
But they'll have to learn to manage their time. You're going to have to do your best to be okay with that. I'm always going to go back and add details to my drawings. I'm always going to go back and make this as beautiful as I can. That is just me, and there's going to be kids like that. But there are kids that need that kind of help, and you need that visual. That's why I said, like, when a teacher can go up to a board and write and draw naturally and just create those images for kids, they see that, and they're able to work through that. You just know that you're going to have to dedicate that time, and that's going to be the tough piece. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of things from my kids, what they've done. Here's a great example that I have here of our kids kind of doing some of that pre-planning and brainstorming, just to show you what that looks like and show you that that doesn't have to look so structured and look so storyboard-ish. This is two students, two seniors, planning out their presentation and their video for their final project. And they're using sticky notes, they're using note cards, they're using writable surfaces to do all this, which is fantastic because it's easily moved around, easily manipulated. What I love is that everybody's on the same page with this. Everybody's working on this. Everybody knows what's going on. So eventually when they reach for that digital tool, they all know what's going on. They can all see the information. They all know their responsibilities.
Excellent.
You good?
Yes, I'm back. Something happened here and I totally dropped off, but Manuel, being the pro that he is, he was able to keep going without me being there, which was good. I think what happened was my my authentication on this computer expired and it just dropped me off of everything. I had to go log back in. So so thank you for continuing on in my absence. That was great.
And I'm going to show another example.
Yes, please do.
That's okay. Yeah, so I was just showing this example here of students working on kind of storyboarding, but without necessarily storyboarding. They were using index cards and sticky notes. I have another example of students using storyboarding and drawing. This is a student who's going to be designing an app for a project. And so we were teaching students how to wireframe. And we showed them how to wireframe with kind of a structured template, and then we also talked about using sticky notes and using index cards. So eventually these students will take these sticky notes and actually replay out what it's like to actually interact with that app. And so they'll have somebody walk through the app and click a button not virtually, but on the paper, and then the student will put down the next sticky note and then put down the next sticky note for every screen and kind of walk through that app, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any other examples that you've got to show us? These are great. So
this is a great example of visual thinking by adults. This is from Chris McGee. He is our educational director of academic and student services. And this is them. I can't remember what they were trying to work through, but him and our communications director were working through a problem. And this is their thinking. This is what they did. in order to plan out everything. I think they were trying to tie student support to kind of back to the classroom and back to the school. But again, another way of visual thinking, that is drawing. Even though there are no icons or no anything, they're still using those concepts of putting that out in front of them.
Can I tell you what that reminds me of? I talked sometimes to teachers about different ways that, through the lens of sketchnoting anyway, how that can look in the classroom. And that reminds me of, we talk about sometimes how whenever a lesson is done or whenever you've had a conversation or a class discussion, and at the end of class, kind of almost as an exit ticket, to have students go up to the board and to have them draw out, with maybe a little icon and a little piece of text, or however, have them draw out their key takeaway for the day. And then you've got this great big board and you can see, are there repetitions? And if so, that was the big takeaway for almost everybody. It's great feedback for the teacher, but it also is a good closure activity for the kids too. And that board that I just saw of teachers sketching, so to speak, that just reminded me of that.
Yeah, it can be found something. It's trying to kind of go past the idea of what is drawing. What does drawing look like? Is it art? It's not. And it's anytime that you're putting pen to paper and creating these objects or these things in front of you and organizing them. That's drawing. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily in the form of something, because we as learners, or the kids as learners, are attaching meaning to all those things. So
yeah, that's great. All right. I feel like we could talk about this like on and on and on and on, and we probably will at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as we sort of wrap this up a little bit, if anybody's interested in learning more about this, about the idea of visual thinking and how we can get, some of that visual type stuff, whether it's, words arranged in different parts on a board, or bringing in little icons or little pictures or whatever, if their interest is piqued on this and they want to learn more about it, do you have resources? Do you have suggested resources, like if they want to dig deeper?
So we actually have, we're actually putting together, myself and Sadie Lewis, who is kind of has the same role as I do in a neighboring school district. Her and I, we've been going back and forth on creating resources and putting resources together. We work a lot together across districts, which is awesome. And so we've kindly put enough things together that we said, okay, we need to put these things out there. And so we are, hopefully this week, we're going to be publishing a series of blog posts and visuals on how to use drawing to manage your learning. And I actually I'll put this up, and I have a graphic for it so that you can get the link off of it.
Here's that gorgeous image you created for the Ditch Summit. I saw that up there.
Yeah. I was super excited to make it. Here it is. Here is visual thinking. So at the very bottom it's actually Sadie's blog, because it's funny, we work well together because I am not someone who enjoys writing. That is not my jam. I love to draw and to draw my thinking, and Sadie does a great job of taking my thinking and my drawings and putting words to them. So that's another reason why we had this idea. So visual thinking to manage learning, and we're going to share real examples and real ideas of us using this in the classroom. And this is kind of a timeline, but kind of like we work with kids on design a lot, and in each step of the design process that we work with kids, we use drawing. For the purposes of sharing, for the purposes of communicating, for the purposes of problem solving. So we'll talk about how we use it in research, how we use it with students when they interview. Definitely the brainstorming process is probably one of my favorite when it comes to drawing to show my thinking, and storyboarding, and then prototyping. So the link at the bottom, sadiecreates.com, it's going to happen, I guess, this week. I think we've been kind of putting deadlines for ourselves, and I think we're now at a point where we have to get this out. So it'll be a series. I don't know. I think we're going to try to do 4 or 5. I'm maybe putting a number on something we haven't decided. Sorry, Sadie.
Well, I guess if you're saying this and it's going to come out during the summit, maybe that can help you with your deadlines. That knowing that there are going to be some people that are going to check this out now. So yeah,
that's kind of why I'm doing it. so hopefully it'll push us to put that out. So I mean, we're going to give you some real examples and some practical ways of using drawing in your classroom, and it gets, like I said, to manage the learning. I work with high school kids a lot, and middle school kids, and they don't know how to manage projects. They don't know how to project manage their day, and so we're going to use some of those visuals to help them with that. You think of elementary kids, we create visual schedules for them, right?
Mm.
That's every child, so that they can have an idea of how their day will flow or how an event is going to happen. And at some point, like, we just stopped doing that because they're middle school kids. They're responsible. They should know how to do this. No, are you kidding me? Like that, a middle school kid, an adult. As an adult, we love agendas. And that's a visual schedule. Like, we want to see those. So we try to help kids kind of manage their time and manage their projects using drawings, using simple sketches to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We operate in a very visual world, and we take it for granted, not take it for granted, but we dismiss it a lot as a way for us to think.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're talking about the visual schedule so kids can see it, and all of a sudden at some point they quit, and then here we are as adults. You know what this is? Google Calendar. There it is, just exactly as it is with the little ones. So.
And it's funny because you're going to recall those images in your head in the order of everything. You just do it, and because it's digital, because it's pretty, you would never think I could just draw. I would draw that, but that's where some kids are. You can draw that out. You can make that look a certain way. It's interesting. I enjoy using visual thinking to help pull ideas out of kids. I really do. Like, that's where I found that that's how I think it's the most practical and the most useful. Is there are definitely ways to take notes, to use drawing to get information from other places, whether it's blog posts, podcasts, videos, and then process that and put that down. But that's taking information from someone else, and I really enjoy pulling that information from kids and putting that on paper and letting them organize it. That's a huge difference. There's a big difference in those, so it's been a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great session. This has been really good. So, real quick as we wrap up, real fast here at the end, if people want to get in contact with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Probably Twitter, Instagram, at Manuel Herrera 33. Those are probably the quickest ways to get in touch with me. Email sometimes tends to get lost. So,
yeah. Oh man, tell me about that.
Reach out to me anytime on those two platforms. I try to post a lot of what I do with kids, a lot of their work, a lot of their products, because I think hopefully it inspires teachers to do the same and to kind of not get so caught up in the pretty and the tech. But to give paper a chance and see how powerful it can be.
Yeah, awesome, very good. Well, hey, thanks again so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And of course, thanks to you for watching the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit. Hopefully this has been useful to you. Definitely check out the Twitter hashtag, hashtag Ditch Summit, and you can catch up with all of the discussion that's going on, and definitely do leave your thoughts. And if you're willing to try a little bit of visual thinking, maybe jot some of these things down and draw a couple little images with it and share it out there on Twitter. And we'll be able to kind of see what you've been thinking about this session or other sessions through that visual means. So anyway, thank you again for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video in the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit.